We have a great talk today. We just want to let you know that this meeting is going to be recorded. So please click the continue button. We just want to make this accessible for all the folks who aren't able to join us today. I just want to take a quick moment to introduce myself. So I'm Michael Mezzacapo. I'm an outreach specialist with the Water Resources Research Center and Hawaii Sea Grant College program. Today, we have a great talk with Professor Denise Antolini and Mr. Marvin Heskett. Professor Denise Antolini is with the William S. Richardson School of Law, where she served as Associate Dean of Academic Affairs. She has directed the Environmental Law program and is an instructor of environmental law, legal writing, and advanced environmental law. She's a graduate of Princeton University and UC Berkeley and started her career in the Sierra Legal Defense Club, which is now Earth Justice in Seattle, and then Honolulu litigating environmental citizen suits, including water pollution and water rights. She is also the founding director of the North Shore Community Land Trust, Save Waimea Coalition, and Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea, and the Save Sharks Cove Alliance. Mr. Marvin Heskett is a practicing environmental consultant and an environmental chemist, and has extensive experience with analytical laboratories as a chemist, quality assurance officer, and laboratory director. In the past, Marvin has collaborated with state agencies, such as the State of Hawaii Department of Health, to develop laboratory protocols for the recent state contingency plan. He has participated in several research studies and co-authored papers on environmental sampling and plastic pollution. Marvin enjoys life as a father and husband, is an avid surfer, and remains an active member of the Honolulu community, working with the Surfrider Foundation and his neighborhood board on water quality issues. And with that, I'll hand it over to Professor Antolini.
Great. Aloha, everyone. It's a pleasure to see so many people show up on Friday afternoon before Valentine's weekend. And it's really nice to see many old friends and new friends in attendance today. So on my behalf, on behalf of Marvin and our organizations, we really appreciate your making time on a Friday afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. All right, so we are honored to present to the Water Resources Research Center as part of the Ikawai seminar series. And you're going to hear about our multiple roles as Michael introduced us, but we have a few more introductory comments to make. So here's a little roadmap of where we're headed. First, we're going to talk about why we care. Then we'll talk about the place, Kapo Tidepools, and the Marine Life Conservation District. And I'm going to switch to a story map to explain some of the cool, amazing things about this area. Then we'll provide you a little bit of our nonprofit community perspective. This is very much as the title implies, a community perspective on water quality issues. Then we'll talk a little bit about what we know about some of the current terrestrial threats to the area and some of the testing that's been done. Then we'll look forward at how we're going to continue to monitor and improve our testing from a variety of ways and take a more holistic look at the threats to the area. And then we'll end talking about future steps, management and research opportunities, and we'll try to sink the hook in all of you to do research projects up here. And we're both going to keep an eye on the time. So if your alarms go off, don't be alarmed. That's we're just trying to make sure that we have a lot of time at the end for Q&A. All right, so let me next go to why we care. I'm going to turn it over to Marvin.
All right, aloha. I appreciate you guys spending your time. Humbled by your presence. I'd also like to say happy Lunar New Year. Coming up on a 3-day weekend and the Lunar New Year. So a special time, and I appreciate you guys being here. So I got involved with Denise and others who care for this special place at Sharks Cove. You know, I started coming to the Cove to dive recreationally the way a lot of other folks have. And when our son was born, it was our favorite place to go as a family for him to be able to go and explore. And kind of get his first taste of marine ecology and the environment, his little mass snorkeling around. It was a few years ago. I was heading up to the North Shore, and it was during a rain event, and I saw, dark brown polluted runoff entering the tide pools and turning them brown. And I was kind of shocked. I had never seen it before. I started looking around and saw where I believe the, soil and sediments were coming from. And I think I reached out to Denise at that point and said, this is disconcerting. And she said, well, come get involved. So there's a whole wonderful group that Denise will talk more about, Mālama Pūpūkea, that I got involved with, helping them to work on water quality issues.
You're going to explain who that cute baby is, Marvin? Come on.
Okay, yeah, that's my son. His third birthday party at Sharks Cove.
Just a while ago. And just to add to what Marvin said, so Marvin and I have known each other for a long time in different capacities, but this was an opportunity to work together that we have just really enjoyed. And on the right is me and my older son, jumping in the deeper area of Sharks Cove. And then down below is, some of you know, the McElhaney's, the McElhaney Mo'opuna. So this area is near and dear to the hearts of many people, not just those of us who live on the North Shore. I live in Pūpūkea, Marvin lives in town, but for so many people, the tide pools are a special place for them and their families. We're going to talk about water quality today. There are a lot of things that we're not going to be able to talk about, which is what an incredible marine life area this is. I'll touch upon that, but we're really going to focus on water quality. So this is just kind of a quick dive into the tide pools. So obviously we care a lot on a personal level, on a professional level, and then we have our nonprofit roles as well. So from all three perspectives, this is a pretty special spot. So there we are, zooming in here. You obviously, you guys know Oahu quite well. I'm sure if we asked you to raise your hand, almost all of you would have say that you've been to Sharks Cove. The tide pools are the shallow area here in front of you. I'll give you a tour in just a minute, but this shallow area, which is actually an old quarry where they quarried out this area for rubble, for roads. So, but the deeper area has been long-standing. So we call this 3-acre area on the right, the shallow tide pools, Kapo. And it's interesting, a lot of people know Sharks Cove, but they don't kind of think twice about the tide pools. So that's why we wanted to zoom in today and really talk about this very special place. Okay, so now if you just give me a second, I'm going to switch to this wonderful story map. There's a young man named Keelan Barcina. I hope some of you know him or will know him, who worked for us as he was finishing his master's at Scripps, produced this story map for us. And I'm pleased to say he's now working for the Office of Planning, which is fantastic. So I'm just going to switch for a minute to this story map. Stop sharing my slide. Okay, this is a wonderful ArcGIS story map that Keelan produced because we had never really pulled together all the stories about the Kapo'o tide pools and what they mean to the entire marine life conservation district. So this puts them in perspective. And also you'll see, I'm going to only scroll through parts of it, but you can obviously go back and visit it later. We produced this in part because we're going through a rule amendment for the MLCD and we wanted to use it as an educational tool. So I'm going to just stop a few times. I apologize, I'm going to scroll pretty fast, but it's to entice you to go back and learn more about this incredible area. So this is the area called Kapo'o near the fire station, which is over here on the right, and there's Foodland. This development over here, which we'll talk a little bit about, in the deeper area of Sharks Cove. And as those of you who have visited the area know, it changes so much seasonally. Like right now with high surf, it is just crashing, making incredible sights and sounds. And that's, we believe, is the basis for the cultural name Kapo'o. And the area is very, very popular with snorkelers and divers in the deeper area, divers. And it's considered to be a pico or a po'onua for the entire MLCD because its shallow water habitat, its rugosity, and its very dynamic features lend to very, very rich marine life. And just a reminder, this is only one of 3 MLCDs on Oahu. You all know Hanauma Bay, Waikiki the second, but it's highly visited. And here's another picture which shows you the zone going from Waimea Bay all the way over to essentially the Keiki Beach area. So again, today we're not going to cover too much of the marine life issues, but focusing on water quality. There is a water quality picture I want to show you here in just a second. You can see how beautiful the water quality was post-COVID pause. It clarified the water almost immediately because people weren't trampling the area. So this is example of a common kind of trampling problem. And I wanted to just stop here for a moment and talk about human use. So you can see in the background, a lot of people in the tide pools, even when the surf is up, maybe even more so, the tide pools become a magnet because they're such a good refuge for families and beginning swimmers. I don't know if you can see it here, but I'm going to play this short glitchy video showing sediment accumulation in the area that we're going to be focusing on, where we have some sediment drainage. So hopefully you can see a little bit of how that sediment gets stirred up. So I'll stop for now and encourage you to go back to this story map and hope you will enjoy it at a later time. Let me get back to our slides. Okay, are we back to the slides, Marvin? Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to ask Marvin to talk a little bit about Surfrider and their perspective on this issue.
Yeah, so I'm a volunteer. I've been a volunteer with the Surfrider since for the last, I don't know, it's embarrassing how long, over 25 years. But the Surfrider Foundation is a national grassroots organization. It's aimed at protecting and enjoying our ocean, waves, and beaches for everyone through a powerful activist network. That for everyone has been recently added with cultural things we've been going through in the US. It's got over 80 volunteer-based chapters spanning 10 regions across the continental US and Hawaii. And it represents a wide range of ocean users who are in the front lines of ocean and coastal advocacy. Probably several of you have worked with Surfrider on different studies. I know we've helped volunteer for various studies that folks with WRRC have worked on. Our primary focus with Surfrider is focusing on water quality, beach access, beach and surf spot preservation, and sustaining marine and coastal ecosystems. We've been doing work through our Blue Water Task Force, which looks for water quality bacteria, indicator bacteria, at Sharks Cove for quite a few years. And then recently, as I got involved because of the apparent stormwater runoff issue, Surfrider also got involved with some studies that we've coordinated with Mālama Pūpūkea in conducting some background water quality and also stormwater impact. I think Denise will talk now a little bit about who the great Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea is.
Thank you, Marvin. It's been so much fun to partner with Surfrider. So Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea, and I'm going to give a shout out to, I know our Director of Education, Jenny Yagadich, is watching. Her incredible work and the organization's work started way back in 2005. And actually, our organization formed in response to a development program. Some of you may remember the No Mall at Sharks Cove effort. So we decided to form and do proactive stewardship. So we're a marine stewardship organization. We're pretty small, but we're mighty. We do a lot. You can see there's some of the great photos of our board members, our educational programs, our native plant program, which I'll return to. We do human use monitoring, outreach, and education. And anything that the MLCD needs to improve. It's a huge task. Our organization is actually very much focused on the entire Tu'apua'a, Pūpūkea, and Waimea, with a laser focus on the MLCD and lately a laser focus on Kapo tide pool. So it's a privilege to be able to be part of such a great organization. And I think bottom line, as we transition here to the next slide, Surfrider and MPW have been really involved because there is almost no government support for stewardship of the MLCD. And I know DLNR does what it can and City Parks does what it can, but it's really been up to the community to really step in. I'll describe this slide and then Marvin's going to jump in. So this is on the bottom left there. It shows the fire station at Kapo, the basketball courts, and then you see the beach portion, the sand portion of the tide pools. And then food land across the street, and then an area just to the left of that, which is a approximately 3 acre development, Pūpūkea Road and the highway. And I'm going to turn it over to Marvin to describe these runoff incidents and how Surfrider got involved. All
right. Yeah, so as you can see by the discharge coming out of this storm drain outfall here, we can't see in this picture, but I may think in one of the next slides, it probably shows up, is, yeah, actually, Denise, you can go ahead, go to the next slide.
Next slide, okay.
Yeah. Where that drains, it comes right onto the beach. Well, it's even hard to see in this picture, but this is on the beach and the stream turns and it keeps going all the way into the tide pools. And so what happens is during heavy rainoff events, when there is excessive sediment upstream that goes into that storm drain inlet you saw in the previous picture, this sediment-rich water turns and runs down across the beach and into the tide pools. What seemed weird to me and several other people I talked to is that we hadn't been accustomed to seeing that water with that brown color, even though, of course, there was runoff after every rain event, but it seemed to be pulling more sediments with it for some reason. And so we had the question, is this harmful? And if so, how is it harmful? And what can we do to try to change that? So we, Surfrider, with the help of Mālama Pūpūkea and myself, sat down and we spent time putting together a water quality monitoring plan. And so we asked the questions of what potential pollutants or inputs could be entering these sediments that would be harmful to the marine ecology. And we evaluated the various operations and activities upstream. And we looked at things relating to the food trucks, to cars in the parking lot, to the road. And we ended up coming up with this list of analyses. You can see the various analytes we picked tabulated there. And they include stuff that could be, caused by, a grease trap on a food truck, to brake dust, to nutrients involved with fertilizing, the landscaping, so on and so forth. We did test this water and we sent it to a laboratory and it came back well above state recommended action levels for several components, including all of the nutrients, the total suspended solids, the turbidity, and a few of the heavy metals. Fortunately, we didn't see any of the organic constituents like the PAHs that we were also looking for. I think we can move to the next slide, Denise. Oh, one thing we did also is we set up a rain gauge in the neighborhood there. The nearest NOAA rain gauge was several miles away. So we set up a rain gauge at a resident's house right in the community there, and we recorded the amount of rainfall during the period of the study, just so that we could relate those masses with a lot of hand waving to potential loading. And we came up with, the approximate loading of sediments to the tide pool from waters of that kind of water quality from that type of runoff event. And they correlated really well to the slide that Denise showed earlier when she was wafting the sediment, or someone was wafting the sediment in that slide with their hand. You could see it coming up. It was right out here, right outside of these tide pools. We also did a background study of water quality. So we waited, and little did we know when we started this program that COVID would come along, which actually provided us a bizarrely excellent set of conditions to do background testing. So with no tourism and nobody in the pools, we actually went along and we collected water quality samples on 2 separate occasions and at several different stations to compare over time. And I think, Denise, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, and I just want to add this site that's in this slide is exactly where, and it was me wafting the sediment. It's the exact same location. So the clarity of the water is just outstanding post-COVID and when there's less human use. Now I'm going to switch a little bit to the kind of public health side and just to give you a sense of how little sampling has been done up here. As a nonprofit organization, we're doing this on top of all of our other jobs and things that we do. But one of our first goals was to figure out like who's been testing what. And so talked to Marvin about Surfrider, dug into the clean water branch of the Department of Health, public health, to look at the public health angle. And we found water quality testing data for Enterococcus and Clostridium at Sharks Cove, and we were surprised by that. So we looked into it further, and unfortunately, our friends down at Clean Water Branch mislabeled it, and it's actually not at Sharks Cove. It's at Three Tables. So if you look at that little site map on the right, fire station is here. We're talking about this area over here, and the sampling's over here at Three Tables. So we'll be working with them to correct that. It's not very frequent. Here's a little snapshot. And sorry to go back. And, we just need more of that kind of investment by the state agencies and the county agencies in water quality testing. We have incredibly high human use up here. So that's just an example of a puka we need to work on. These are all opportunities. Another opportunity came along when this area over here in the yellow has started to get developed in 2015. As Marvin mentioned, the food trucks, there's a lot of activity going on over there. And because of the permitting process, it resulted in the EIS, which provided a lot more information about what's the current and potential water quality issues could be. And these are excerpts from Marine Resource Consultants report in 2017 showing elevated nitrogen and phosphorus currently, exceedances of state water quality standards, as well as on the bottom here, a little snippet talking about how proposed development on the site of a 32,000 square foot commercial center will increase that loading. So these are all adding to our understanding of what's going on there and important pieces that we're trying to fit together. Okay, Marvin, back to you.
Yeah, so I discussed a little bit about the surface runoff and what we found in the analysis of that sediment-rich water. So what's going on here is we do have the parking structures for the food land draining, going into that storm drain. We also have this development to the side with food trucks, and they have a lot of exposed soil in their driveways, and we saw that it was running down the ramp to the property. So they have been putting in some mitigative measures, which is good to see. You can see these biosocks that have been installed around the perimeter. But then we are also looking at the issues of the park itself, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in a few minutes. We also were interested in knowing more about the subsurface groundwater pathways, which Denise mentioned a little bit earlier from the EIS, but we'll get into a little bit more right now.
Mm-hmm. So I'll get into that in a second. I just wanted to mention two more big factors. These are all huge. We could do hours on each one. But the third bullet there, tidal influence, one of the things that Tom Nance did a study, bikinis. Tom Nance did a study as part of the EIS. And among the many things that they found on the site was a strong tidal influence at both well sites. There are two monitoring wells. You'll see that in a future slide. And the tidal influence, with amplitudes on the order of 1/3 to 1/2, and with high permeability. So as we're trying to understand what are the water quality pathways and impacts on the tide pools, that's another factor that we didn't quite think about, which is, in my kind of non-scientific view, I think about that as the tide going underneath the Malca areas and kind of scrubbing them twice a day. So again, opportunities for further research. It's not unique to this area, but because the MLCD has Class AA waters in such high use, we're really trying to focus on all these opportunities. Last one I'll mention now, and we'll kind of return to it as well, which is working with the city on the city park issues. So we've got footpaths with major erosion, and the lower right there is a project that MPW has worked really hard on, which is eliminating the gullies and the obvious erosion, replanting with native plants, putting up signage, asking people to respect the area, working with the city master plan for the park. We are concerned about the septic system, which gets really heavy use, and how it's doing. So we'll be looking into that. We'll talk at the very end about a tracer study that we're hoping to get funding for. And Marvin already mentioned Surfrider's doing some testing near the bathrooms. So let me move on, if I can, keeping an eye on time, to, oh, Marvin, rain garden. That's where the slide ended up.
Well, one of the things that, yeah, we were looking at doing to help reduce the impacts, especially from the park itself. The parking lot at the park is a potential contributor. And as Denise was saying, it allows the stormwater runoff to kind of erode the nearby shoreline. So we're considering and working with the city parks to try to help convince them that we can put in a rain garden. We could also divert water from the showers towards the rain garden, which is another potential source of bacteria. Surfrider did a study on through all the showers of Waikiki, and we're pretty amazed and shocked and startled at the results of how high of concentrations we were finding of bacteria in the shower runoff. So these are some concepts we have for improving and using the data that we're getting right now to help find solutions to improve the water quality of the cove.
And on the left, there's a Surfrider project. Where is that, Marvin?
That's at Hokulani School. So that was something where Hokulani School and the Surfrider Foundation combined with some local contractors who do this kind of work and installed a rain garden, which to this day is, I believe, I know a few years ago at least, it was still working well 10 years later, helping mitigate flooding and ponding that was happening on the campus. And it turned into this beautiful garden area. So we're hoping that we can do something similar with volunteer efforts at the park there.
Yeah, and on the right, that's Waimea, not Sharks Cove, but as Marvin indicated, and we can attest, all kinds of things happen in that shower, and it is literally no more than 20 feet away from the tide pools, and of course we know it's all sand. So this is just an example of a nature-based solution that we need to be working on with partners. So let me go back to some of the subsurface dynamics. As part of the environmental impact statement that I mentioned for the development, under Tom Nance's study, 2 monitoring wells were sunk on the property. You can kind of just see them in the graphic on the right, and I tried to repaste a little photo below so you can get a sense of it. And he found some very, very interesting things. Concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus flowing under the site with a gain between the Malca and the Moore Mackay well. And those are that's the kind of information we need to continue to work on this issue. What's causing the gain? Is it significant? And how does it tie into the ecological impacts? So that was very helpful. And then MPW, and this is all based on the study I'm just talking about right now with Robert Walker, which is in progress. It's all based on grant money and donations. So this is a really cool project. Some of you have probably done this professionally, and we are just excited to work with Rob on a thermal imaging study to try to identify the groundwater, freshwater influences in the tide pools, because we know it when we snorkel there, when we're in the water there, we know it. but we're trying to combine the cultural knowledge, the community knowledge, and the hard science. So anyway, cool toy shot of the overflight with the Cessna and his drone, the flight pattern, and just some, in his preliminary report, some of the images about the groundwater influx, and one more picture on that. MPW also is a lot of it is citizen science, but we're also trying to combine kind of Western hard science with cultural observations, or KILO, and our citizen science. So on the left, you see Rob's thermal imagery showing kind of the bluer, darker areas where we have upwelling of fresh water. And then we have KILO observations from Jenny Agadich and others. And salinity observations from Keelan Barcina. So we're attempting to kind of blend all of that together so that we get a more holistic picture. So those upwellings are really important to identify, so we can start to understand what pollutants they may bring, as well as what ecological connections they have for the MLCD. Okay, we're doing pretty good on timing. So we're gonna kind of last phase of this, and we're open to all your questions, is really talk about future management and research opportunities. I'll start by talking about a major initiative that we're undertaking now. So Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea is working in partnership with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Aquatic Resources, on a management plan for the entire marine life conservation district as part of the state's 30 by 30 initiative, which, if you're following the news, you know now connects to not only the international 30 by 30, but with President Biden, recent announcements about national 30 by 30 goals as well. So things are aligning. DAR has a very ambitious plan to do, or goal to do management plans for all the MLCDs and marine managed areas in Hawaii, and we're very happy to be partnering with them on that. So we could use help. We're going to be doing some community outreach, but a fundamental part of that is understanding the cultural foundation and the scientific foundation for the area. So it all can be integrated and we can look for opportunities. I'll just mention the next one as an outgrowth of that. I know there's some Sea Grant people on here, so not making a pitch, but I'm just saying, we thanks to Sea Grant's been so encouraging. We put in a proposal for a biocultural study with what I call the blue team. So it's Cindy Hunter, myself, Alan Friedlander, Mackenzie Manning, and others. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, to really look at the tide pools in Sharks Cove area from a biocultural perspective. Marvin, you get the next one.
All right. You know, I'll start off by saying, I mean, we haven't said it out loud clearly, but I'm sure it can be assumed that, you know, all this work that we've been doing, the research, you know, we're not making any claims that we've got anything publishable or certain here. It's the best work that we can kind of do as community groups, volunteering our own time. We're each practitioners in our own rights and do these kinds of things for a living. However, you know, the work we're doing is trying to come up with a better understanding and understand, you know, better recommendations for management at this stage. And so we want to keep doing more of it. And we're working on a new one that we're working on is just trying to understand the anthropogenic threats from all these groundwater sources that we've been discussing. Dr. Dulai, who I'm not sure if I saw her come onto this call today, but probably a lot of you work with her, is involved in a current proposal we have for tracing groundwater and looking at tracers for indications of sewage along the tide pools and cove. It's a pretty exciting study where she's going to use radon and various anthropogenic tracers such as caffeine and carbamazepine and a few other tracers to see if we're finding any linkages between human waste threats and the cove's water to help answer those questions. And I think with that said, Denise, I'm sure will take advantage of the situation even more than I, but part of what we were hoping to do is get any of you who are on this conference to get excited and consider ways that you might considering offering help or getting involved with research.
So you're right, Marvin, I'm going to make a pitch. So as Marvin said, we're doing this in our spare time from a community perspective. So partnerships, grants, and just advice and networking is so important. And here I have to really give a big shout out to Michael and WRRC. It's been such a pleasure to be able to count on him for advice. He's been incredibly helpful, along with Marvin and everybody else, in helping us see opportunities. We've had interns, we've had researchers come in and out of the area, but we want to encourage more of it. And let me tell you why it's a fantastic place to do research. You have really friendly community folks who are willing to host you. The access is amazing. And it's such an important area that we hope that whatever research is done will really have an impact on the entire MLCD and hopefully statewide through our 30 by 30 partnerships. So if your passion is marine life or cultural sites, traditional and customary rights, all the way to recreational use impacts, we could use your help. So when I say we, down at the bottom there's my email and Marvin's, and we are, again, grateful for the opportunity to share some of the highlights of what's going on up here. There's a lot more to tell, but we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for questions. And I think it's 2:42, so I feel like we're very appreciative that we have time for a good discussion. So I'll stop sharing with our thanks.
Thank you, Professor Antolini. I appreciate it. Thank you, Marvin. That was a great presentation. We do have a couple of questions that have trickled in, so I'll start with those. The first one was from Crystal. What types of bacteria were found in the shower water at Waikiki?
Yeah, great question. We were just looking for the tracer enterococcus. Surfrider has an IDEX system, and so we're able to collect samples and analyze them for enterococcus using that. So there could be a lot more work done on that. It would be interesting, or maybe scary to know.
And I'll just follow up real quick. Denise, you're mentioning that there's a lot of interesting things that go on at the shower. Is there a lot of enforcement that goes on in that area to prevent people from doing those? What do you think is a good, besides the rain gardens, what else can we do to mitigate sort of those items from entering the nearby water?
Great question. For example, I mean, not to be this crowd cannot be grossed out if you're a water quality crowd. All right, it's like people, it's people cleaning their private parts in the shower, which happens, right? But it's also like baby diapers get just thrown there, and people think that it's the outside bathroom and use it like an outside bathroom. So what can we do besides the rain garden? One of the major initiatives that we've been working on for years and years is just signage, really nice educational signage. And if you go up there, you're going to see a lot of really pretty signs that we've been putting in over the years in partnership with the city and the state. And I know at other beaches, there's signage near the showers that says, don't use soap, and here's why. Or I don't know, are there signs that say don't pee or poop in the outdoor shower? My goodness. I mean, we really could do with some signage, with some nature-based solutions, and maybe long-term a CIP project, but we know how far in the future that's going to be, to maybe potentially move the showers or to have some kind of filtration system. But we're really looking for simple solutions right now.
Thanks. Next question comes from Bob. So what are the annualized head counts of human use in the area, and how can we help control the risk of loving this place to death?
Great. I'm not going to give you an exact figure, but I'll give you some indications. On a busy day when everybody remember when tourism was peaking pre-COVID at 10+ million. So we know the Oahu numbers are very heavy, and then we know of the Oahu numbers, almost half go Circle Island. And when they go Circle Island, they tend to stop at Sharks Cove. So we get huge numbers. We have seen, just on a snapshot, easily 100 people in the tide pools, easily, and on the beach. And so those human use counts, they're a snapshot in time. We can do some extrapolation, but in the peak usage, it's easily 1,000 on busy days, just in the tide pool and then the deep pool area as well. We're not even talking about Waimea, or the Eddy was 30,000 people. But so it's a high concentration in what we consider to be a fairly fragile area. So that's the other thing. It's not just the numbers, it's how people are using the area and whether or not the system is fragile or resilient. Last comment on that, one of the things I mentioned is when we have high surf on the North Shore, I mean, everybody's surfing, but the people who can't surf, primarily tourists, find Sharks Cove to be a place where they can get in the water. So we actually ironically see high densities of people in the tide pools when the other beaches are closed out. Yeah, so I hope that gives it help.
This one will go to Marvin. You told us about some of the sampling efforts around the area, but what are some specific, say, like permanent efforts that can be implemented that will further inform water quality challenges in the area, whether they come from terrestrial or otherwise?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, right now, the state is working on a really good answer. Probably several of you on this conference are aware, or may have even been involved with the drafting of a non-point source rule that the DOH is currently working on. Without a non-point source rule, there really aren't existing NPDES type permits that would apply to the area. There are no industrial facilities that would qualify. However, when there is any form of construction, grubbing and grading, they're supposed to get a temporary construction permit, of which the property owner adjacent to the tide pools did, I believe, have one, or it does have one now to do some of the work they've been doing. So as far as I know, that's the extent of any permitting that would apply.
Can I add to that briefly, as just to add to Marvin's comment? So the development will be putting in a drainage system in the next couple of months, which should help considerably. So that will be going in, and we expect that to have some major mitigation effect. I also just want to mention, I mentioned the porosity. I call it porosity. I'm sure there's a better term for it. The area is a sponge. The Malka area is really a sponge. And, when you think about the Lahaina case, where the Lahaina sewage treatment plant was required by the United States Supreme Court to get an NPDES permit because of the indirect discharge. It raises really interesting issues. If you put a wastewater treatment system, Malka, there for the future development, and it's so close to the coast and it's very porous, is that like Lahaina? Is it so close and so close in time and in space and place? Does that need an NPDES permit? These are issues that are pending, but far from resolved. So, but as Marvin said, unless the state gets a handle on NPS regulation, it's really up to partnerships and community groups. It's a lot of nudging and a positive education, I think.
That'll kind of lead us into the next question, and that, so we usually don't talk about this in the WRRC seminars, but what are some of the legal challenges that exist on land that interface with a marine life conservation district? Are there, extra protections that are being taken or can be taken adjacent to an area such as this?
Marvin, me? Yeah. So There has been litigation involving the development that we've been referring to across from Sharks Cove. And some of you may have seen the good news in the Star Advertiser last week that the organizations that were involved in that, which include Surfrider and Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea, Hawaii's Thousand Friends, and 3 individuals under the Save Sharks Cove Alliance banner did settle with the developer. So it was a mutual and positive settlement with the developer and with the city and county of Honolulu. So the interface there on the permitting is the special management area permit that is needed for these areas that are within the regulation of the CZ, of the Coastal Zone Management Act. So, so yes, there has been litigation, there has been legal action. Happy to say that it's settled. That settlement agreement is public and is available, and it includes a lot of guardrails, including on water quality impacts and monitoring. So in general, what I would say is anytime there's a change in land use, there's an opportunity to do better and to monitor and to bring in better science. So that development actually provided us an opportunity to learn more and to provide some better mitigation in the future, we hope.
Need to make sure I unmute myself. Oh, we have another question that I did not understand if the water sampling showed elevated results, and if so, for what constituents? Or is there a plan in the future to do more sampling, which I think you alluded to some of the grants that you were looking at, hopefully funding, but I don't know if someone wants to answer that.
Sure, I'll tackle that one. By the way, I think I might have seen Bob Lionel sign on to this conference at some point. He's been really active and involved with the water quality sampling. As Denise mentioned, it's just one of the things nice about doing this from a community basis. It's such a fun group to work with. Everyone up there worked with some really interesting, dynamic, skilled people who are really fun to work with. And anyway, Bob and I have collected samples various times, and he a few times on his own. And the results showed what I summarized, that the stormwater entering the back of the tide pools was pretty heavily polluted. It was the total suspended solids. The nutrients were over 100 times higher than acceptable limits for the, set by the state for coastal discharges. A few of the heavy metals were above the state limits. But then in the background sampling that we did, as anticipated, especially during this COVID time, during a long dry period, the water was very clean. We saw very little of anything except for slightly elevated nutrients and enterococcus located at the sample station that we have closest to the bathrooms. And part of that's what led to the discussions with Dr. Dulai and others in looking for ongoing studies to try to determine what might be causing those elevations. Oh, and yes, for future work, we would like to do a little more work. We don't have, a big statistically valid pool of data yet. We have a few snapshots in time. So it would be nice to do some ongoing work, and then maybe also get some samples from our stations that come from periods of compromised time, like higher flow, stormwater flow in winter versus in pristine time.
That would be really interesting to see those results over time. We have a couple more questions. What can we do to get the government to do more in terms of water quality testing so that nonprofits like yourself don't need to fill that void?
Well, I'll try that. I don't know. I think we all have a common interest in more frequent and more robust state water quality testing. It's just the gold standard that we want to try to do more frequently and allow more areas to be tested. I remember back in the 90s, or at least my impression, I could be wrong, and there was a lot more testing done a lot more frequently. So I think it's a cooperative relationship with our friends at the Department of Health, and I really mean that. I mean, I'm sure they would do more if they could. And working with the legislature, this is going to be a rough year for everybody, but trying to get some funding. We know sampling and testing is not easy. It's not cheap, and but it's so important to do these longitudinal samples. And I think, Michael, you were implying that. So we're working our way toward that. So I think we're going to have to work with the ledge actually to get a more robust statewide program. I know there's some bills in the hopper now that kind of are reopening that conversation.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's important to have communities really take agency and communicate, their needs so that state organizations can see where the gaps are. And so I think it's fantastic that you both are doing that. A couple more questions before we are almost out of time. But is the area identified in the TMDL list?
Denise, do you know? I don't believe so.
I don't think so.
It wouldn't be an impaired water. Yeah, it's fairly pristine.
Last time I looked, I could be wrong, and now I'm going to go look again. I think the nearest TMDL is Kayaka.
I think so too. That's the best of my memory, but I'm not positive.
So we're maybe half right between the two of us, but no, I don't think it is. It's largely, I mean, it's protected as a MLCD, and that gives us the most leverage, I think, at least at the state level. And but anyway, I'll stop there because there's probably more questions on that perhaps.
So this would be a great presentation / panel for HCC. Would you be willing to submit an abstract? There we go.
Working on it on my desk. Would love to, if Marvin's willing.
Fantastic. Well, I don't have any more questions. Is there anything else you both wanted to bring up before we have just about two minutes left?
Marvin, you go ahead.
Gosh. Well, I suppose, I'm just going to try to shamelessly plug away at folks doing research, folks at a penchant for hydrology or marine ecology. If you would like to get involved, do reach out. Denise is just such a fantastic coordinator, and she's really good at using time effectively. So I've seen her just herd a huge number of cats and get us all to like move in the same direction and get things done in a rapid way. So it's a really fun opportunity, and it is such a beautiful environment to work in. It's a nice place, if you have a little extra time your weekend or whenever else to get involved. I also just want to say thank you all too very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
That's more than kind, Marvin. We're all herd cats. I have this beautiful photo of Waimea Bay in my background for a reason. It's just a constant reminder. So this is part of the MLCD, and there's incredible opportunities on Waimea Bay as well as Kaluamaua or Three Tables. So the whole MLCD offers wonderful research opportunities. We'll take high school, undergrad, grad, anybody. And I just want to end on that note. We've had some interns who've started at a very kind of basic level who have gone on to be really inspired to finish their degrees in education, including Anne, you might know Rosinski, Chun, who did her master's thesis on the Tidepools and then went and got her PhD at Manoa and is now with NOAA. And it's just an example of another thing that we love to do, which is to mentor students and really increase those connections with the university. So I'll end by again thanking Michael and April and WRRC and everybody involved for hosting us today for this conversation. Mahalo.
Oh, thank you so much, Professor Antolini and Marvin. We really extend a huge thank you from all of us at WRRC for presenting and just the whole community of Oahu. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you joining us.